me later. So I got to shoot you. And Katie looked at the guy and she said, do the best that you can in this situation. If that's the best you can do in this situation, I understand. Do the best that you can do. The guy was like nonplussed. That is, he didn't know what to do with that. He didn't know where to go with that information, but it caused him to stop for just a minute and reflect on a lot of things in that moment. So many things, in fact, that he just looked at her like she was from Mars. She said, is that the best you can do? If that's the best you can do, okay. And he dropped his gun, dropped her handbag actually, dropped the money, dropped everything. Just like, whoa, I'm dealing with a person here from, Mars, from another planet. I'm out of here. And he said, you're crazy, lady, and ran away. The point of the story is, even when somebody is threatening to end your life, you don't have to do anything in particular, much less what they want you to do. Therefore, nobody does anything that they don't want to do. Every choice you've made in your life is a choice you have made because some alternate choice didn't feel as attractive to you. By the way, people on this planet who are not afraid of death, and there are those, maybe they've already had a near-death experience or for whatever other reason they're not afraid of death, have demonstrated the ability to make remarkably different choices. Remarkably different choices than most of us would make under the same circumstances. So it is, from a spiritual point of view, irrefutable. Nobody does anything they don't want to do. They simply aren't in touch with their reasons for wanting to do it. Yes? When you get in touch with that, you suddenly lose your resentment credentials. That is, you don't have any credentials with which to hold on to your resentment toward other people for what you imagine they made you do. That's a very important step in the forgiveness process. Thank you for letting me take this much time to explain it to you. Step number 2. Nobody does anything, where is it here? Oh, yeah, here it is. Nobody does anything inappropriate given their model of the world. Did you catch that? We'll put it on the screen for you. You want to write these down. Nobody does anything inappropriate given their model of the world. Now, what that means is that the actions of everyone are considered by them to be appropriate for them in any given moment, based on the model of the world that they are holding. And this is an understanding, again, that was given to me by God directly in my conversations with God, because God understands this truth. Nobody does anything inappropriate given their model of the world, which is why God doesn't have to really forgive anyone for anything, because God is aware that inside of the model of the world that you hold, what you did made perfect sense to you. Again, at lectures and public appearances, somebody inevitably gets up, because these are ideas that are very challengeable. Can I put it that way? People are really ready to challenge these kinds of ideas, because the ideas themselves challenge everything or many of the things that people hold sacred in their life, not the least of which is their notion about right and wrong. So you may remember that Conversations with God says there's no such thing as right and wrong. And these are the underlying structures, the underlying truths, the underlying principles behind that larger statement. There's no such thing as right and wrong. underlying that is an awareness, a deep awareness that nobody does anything inappropriate given their model of the world. And as I started to say a minute ago, somebody inevitably gets up at a public appearance on this one and says, well, what about, you know, the real terrorists of the world, or the people who just do horrible things, like that man up in the Midwest who, you know, kidnapped people and killed them, and, you know, cut up their pieces of their body and boiled them and ate them. Remember that guy, Jeffrey Dahmer, I think his name was? Terrible example. But somebody always brings up the Jeffrey Dahmer example. You know, nobody does anything inappropriate. Not given their model of the world. See, the point that's being made here is that the model of the world being lived inside of by a person who's mentally deranged is what motivates their action. And inside that model, what they're doing does not feel inappropriate. Now that doesn't mean, don't equate this. That doesn't mean that society says, fine, go ahead and do it. That doesn't mean that we say, oh, no problem. You know, we're okay with that. And we wouldn't try to stop you. See, that's not what we're saying here. This is the forgiveness process, not the permissive process. Are you clear of the difference? I'm not saying that we permit these things to occur. I'm saying that we have a basis, a groundwork from which we can forgive what happened. And by the way, even the law forgives the Jeffrey Dahmers of the world. They call it innocent by reason of insanity. So even civil law holds a place for no one does anything inappropriate given their model of the world. So, which is why, by the way, people who do terrible things and are not mentally deranged often plead insanity. They try to use the insanity plea as a means of getting away with it under the law, which is another topic altogether. But if we're talking now about personal forgiveness, it's really crucial for you to understand that nobody does anything inappropriate given their model of the world. In other words, from their viewpoint, from their background, from their experience, from their training, from their childhood environment, and from all the experiences that form and shape their model of the world, their action is perfectly understandable, to them acceptable, and appropriate. If we want to change someone's behavior, then, by the way, this is an aside, having nothing to do with forgiveness, but having to do with behavior modification. If we want to modify someone's behavior, then the idea isn't to try to get them to force them to stop doing what they're doing. That hardly ever works, by the way. You try to force someone to stop behaving that way, and they'll just behave that way again the next time they have a chance to. The way to modify behavior is to modify the belief that sponsors the behavior. That is, shift their model of the world. If you do that, the behavior will never reappear. All right. The next teaching in the forgiveness process. I mentioned it a minute ago, and we'll talk about it more fully, more completely here now. There's no such thing as right and wrong. Right and wrong are contextualizations. I made two words out of one. They're contextualizations. Right and wrong are judgments that we make, that we place on activities, actions, or events based on the context within which they occurred. Right and wrong as absolutes don't exist in the universe. There's no such thing as right and wrong. Right or wrong. So I was told this by God in my conversations with God. It was one of the most powerful, one of the most striking, one of the most stop in your tracks messages that I received from God. There's no such thing as right and wrong. All concepts or ideas of rightness or wrongness are held conceptually and contextually. Now again, at my lectures, someone inevitably gets up and says, well, killing, murder is certainly wrong. What, my goodness, Neil, what are you teaching us? What is this stuff? And I go, well, can you think of a situation where a killing, or what you would call murder, is not wrong? Is there any situation like that in your life you could imagine, or that you could, think of in human experience? Well, and the person will inevitably give you 4 or 5 examples. Well, of course, there's self-defense, and a lot of other situations, mostly self-defense is the one they'll raise. But even where it's maybe a war of aggression, where you don't have to, you're not exactly defending yourself. Still, everyone, by the way, here's something interesting. Did you know that every act of aggression is inevitably thought of as an act of defense? That there's no such thing as an act of aggression in the pure sense of the word, in the mind of the aggressor. See, every aggression claims itself to be a defense, or the aggression would not occur. It is not normal or natural to the human condition for one human being to aggress upon another unless they think that there's something they have to defend. Even if it's something they want. I want your land, or I want your money, or I want your water, or I want whatever you have that I don't have. Even if it's an aggression to get something they want, what they're defending against is, of course, not having it, or not having enough of it. And they would have more of it if only you would share, but since you won't share, I have to take it. So at some level of logic, when we extend the line of logic out far enough, we see that all aggression is called defense. That's true of everyone every country that ever started a war. No country ever started a war with the prime minister or president or the head of that country saying, we just did it to be mean. Or we just did it just to kind of take stuff. We're just going to take stuff. No, every country that starts a war rationalizes the war as the only way they could get what they needed to have, the only way they could do it. So in that sense, it's a form of defense. I could use the example of terrorists in the world today, who would tell you that exact thing. If you talk to a person that we label as a terrorist, they will tell you that exact thing. We only do what we do because it's the only way to get or to be treated the way we believe we deserve to be treated, or to make the point that we have been trying to make by every other means, and no one's been listening to us. You will not listen to us, and no one else will listen to us, but maybe now you will pay attention. So when Osama bin Laden was asked, how could he have approved 9/11 and the killing of 3,000 innocent Americans, he said 2 things that were quite astonishing. Number one, he said, first of all, there's no such thing as an innocent American, because America brags, in fact, that it exists in a democratic country where everybody is involved in the decision-making process. Everyone decides who their leaders are going to be, and if they don't like the decisions made by their leaders, they have the ability to get those leaders out of office. So every American is, by extension, therefore, responsible for the choices and decisions made by their leaders. And those choices and decisions through the years have killed a lot more than 3,000 innocent people in my country and in my culture. Many more than 3,000. And we asked you to stop, and begged you to stop, and yelled about you stopping, and you wouldn't stop. So we had to get your attention. It's regrettable that we had to do it this way. That's what he said. I'm not making him right. Get this, I'm not making the man right. I'm telling you what he said. You see, no one does anything inappropriate given their model of the world. There's no such thing as right and wrong. There's only the context within which an action is held.